Good morning. Hello. Welcome to Mending Threads, your safe place and stronghold for whole body wellness. We have a great show for you this morning. We want to talk frankly as to how it relates to stress and trauma in our daily lives, particularly from an Afrocentric or African American point of view. And we have two guests with us this morning. Miss Florine is going to talk with us, and Florraine Owens, may I say, and Dr. Aswad Walker from Texas Southern University's Urban Resource and Resource Center. And he's a historian, a culturist, and I think educator. And so I'm thinking we're going to get some points. And I want to say Ms. Owens is going to come from her personal point of view and her activism in the community. So look forward to the show, and I look forward to your participating with us. And so we have with us audience this morning. We have, I call him Dr. Aswad Walker because he's so well informed with the Urban Research and Resource Center at Texas Southern University. And we have also with us, who's going to be our second guest, we have Miss Florine Owens, who's going to share experiences and wisdom that she has encountered throughout her life from a personal perspective as well. So I'd like to get started this morning with Mr. Walker because I want to find out a little bit about what you do there at the Urban Research and Resource Center and a little bit more about you as director there. So what do you do there?
Mm-hmm. Well, the Urban Research and Resource Center at Texas Southern University was created to make sure that TSU was living up to its designation as a special purpose institution for urban programming. And so what we do is we get students and we get professors, et cetera, to do research into issues that are impacting urban folk, Black and brown folk. And we know that there's a myriad of issues. So we have focused on 5 different areas: education reform, criminal justice reform, the history of African Americans in Houston, which is almost like a blind spot because there's so much history, but it's poorly documented. Housing, community, and economic development, and for some reason I'm forgetting the fifth
one. Well, it seems like you do a lot over there that we really need to know more about. And I know I've been studying what you do, and we've been talking to people in the community as we did our survey, as we're completing our survey or engaged in it. And they're wanting to hear more about the research that you're engaged in. And I know that there was some big research that you discovered in terms of the third ward community and incarceration and some other aspects. And I was wondering if you could share where you are in some of your research.
Well, so some of the research projects, one of them is compiling the history of Pleasantville. Pleasantville is a historic African-American community in Houston that has this incredible history in terms of its political impact that doesn't get enough love and appreciation. So that's one thing we're doing. We're putting together urban resource guides for Third Ward, Sunnyside, Fifth Ward, et cetera, because we talk about Buy Black, we talk about supporting our own, but oftentimes we don't recognize and know all the incredible resources that are right there in our neighborhoods. And so as a service, we've already produced the Third Ward research guide, resource guide, and we're seeking to work on the Fifth Ward, et cetera. We had some of our students work on the Camp Logan story over 100 years ago. If you look it up, if you Google it, they'll call it a riot, but it was actually Black soldiers fighting back against the onslaught of racism and violence against Black people, particularly Black women, that took place here in Houston. And so they wanted to hold the Houston Police Department and others to account for how they were mistreating Black people. And one of the reasons why that story is not more well known is because actually more whites died in the fray than Blacks, and that's not a story that folk wanted to wanted to uh, popularize, because you had black people with a willingness to stand up and fight for their dignity, their rights, etc. Uh, the Sugarland '95 with the whole convict leasing story that went national and international. Well, before that even hit, we had one of our students doing research on the convict leasing program out in Sugarland.
Yeah.
So we've been on the cutting edge, and we enjoy what we do, because it's stuff that we need to know about, that can empower us, because if we know more about our past, we can better deal with our present and build a better future.
I think so. I think one of the things that I read a piece of research recently. I think it was out of University of Texas, and it was speaking about how when people do not study their history or look at historical events that are occurring and no one's talking about it, how that actually fuels anger, because people do not have a venue or a way, if you could say, to see the world and to also see themselves.
Right.
So maybe can we, and I know that the American Psychological Association is having a town hall this evening at 7 o'clock to really look at the trauma and the mental anguish. So I hope everybody goes on to register to see if they can register to get information, because there's something that's going to happen, what you're speaking about, how information is not discussed in the schools, nor is it discussed in the media. And this is one of the reasons why we're having this platform here, so that we can get it out in the community, realities and truth, so we could bring about harmony, so we could bring about people talking and feeling equal enough. That's what it's beginning to be about.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're talking about the African concept of Sankofa.
Yes,
Looking back in order to move forward.
yes.
In fact, we can't move forward if we don't take the best
Don't
of
take.
our past. And one of the issues that we're fighting is what intellectuals or folk in the ivory towers call epistemic violence. It's basically the whitewashing of our history, our story, our accomplishments, and that's one of the reasons why we have such a blind spot to our own story. But you have to have that if you're going to be a whole and healthy person. And I'm going to be quiet because I want to hear what Sister Owens has to say on all this.
Well, Mr. Walker, I'm glad that you said that, because I actually was writing notes, and when you said that whitewashing our history, I would like to see more African Americans teach our Black children. And if a Caucasian person is going to teach our children, which they are, I want them to teach them true history. I don't want it whitewashed. Teach them the true history. And that's one of my main concerns. We shouldn't say that Black people were played. Tell the ugly truth about history, because we need to know.
Yeah.
We need to know, and so it's imperative that we
Yeah.
teach that, and it's imperative that we stand up and that we vote. I, in fact, like what's going on. I love this movement. I like the fact that Blacks, whites, Asian, all races are coming together as one to stand up for racism. Racism been here for a very long time, and it's kind of troubling to me how the media wants to say, oh, well, they want to portray like racism just happened. No, it's been happening for 400 years. It's just now being recorded. We can see what these people are doing. So can you just imagine what African American men, women, and children been through 300 to 400 years ago? Worse of things. So yes, it's time. It's time for a change. Teach our children the right information about our history. We don't know where we're from. Isn't that sad? We don't even know nothing about us. We only know what we're taught. And another thing I want to erase is how some people say that Black is dirty. Black is beautiful. So we need to work on that as well, because that's what we were taught by Caucasians. And I'm just going to say how I feel. Yes, Black. They put that Black is dirty, Black people are thugs, and no, we need to change all of that. So I'm happy that this movement is going on. I want it to continue. I don't want any more of our books to be whitewashed and saying that Blacks were paid for their services. They were not. Go ahead and just say that Black women were raped, beaten. And, another thing that troubles me is when you see these races out here, the KKK stating that they don't want blacks around. I don't know if they even heard about the one drop. You're all black. Yes, if you ask me, one drop, you're black. And we already know history. We know that their ancestors, their forefathers raped a lot of men and women. So that's where I stand on it.
So I know that we talked. So some people, I've looked in the textbooks. So as we got ready, I began to just grab textbooks off the shelf and went to the lot, looking through the media and things like that to see. And one of the things is that things are cited, but they're not discussed. They're not really told as to how it actually occurred. And what happens is that in groups, we all go to church. Most people go to church and whatever. And so in church, so we had a discussion last night on another show. It's going to be on Roku or something. And we were talking about how racism and all of this about this is none other than a relationship, and how the relationships were built on a need on finance, on a need to feel superior. And see, things don't continue unless there's a motivation for it to continue. It occurs for a reason and it continues for a reason. So even when you look at any kind of mental stress or any behavior, I don't care what you do, they tell you, let's look for the background for this. Let's look for the motivation for it, and let's look at what sustains it. So the threads for a healthy relationship is appreciation of the other person. I don't care which relationship you're talking about. Understanding where that person comes from. The transparency to share who you are and allow them to be who they are. Communication. So these are the things, if we wanted to get rid of the difficulty, we could just use this model and to do this. And then start, you'd have to do what? What would we have to do? I think we should talk about that with our own minds, you see. And so I was going to ask the two of you, let's talk about, especially Dr. Walker, I wanted to see what your research said. What have you come up with to even follow up with on what Ms. Owens said? I know we're going to talk more about her personal experience towards the second half of the show. But I wanted to see what your research and what your thoughts have, because I know you're a good historian. So I want you to share with us some of the thoughts about how we perpetuate. How is it perpetuated over the years? What's the thread for this? The motivation
For the perpetuation of our trauma.
Yes.
So several people have spoken on this historically. Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr. He had a term, he called it niggerization. Dr. Naeem Akbar had a similar term. He called it internalized depression. Dr. Joy Leary DeGure, she calls it post-traumatic slavery syndrome. Yeah. But they're all talking about the same thing. They're all talking about the fact that the enslavement of African people, and we were not slaves, we were enslaved, but the enslavement of African people and all the negative experiences from those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and the violence and the domestic terrorism that was pointed at us even after we were quote unquote free. All that is literally in our bones, in our DNA. We carry that with us, and that's what those terms, niggerization, internalized depression, and post-traumatic slavery syndrome, speak of. Reverend Albert B. Clegg was talking about niggerization in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and people laughed at him. But just about, I think, 10 years ago, there was a study done on the sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters of survivors of the Jewish Holocaust. And they found scientific evidence to show that the traumas that their grandparents and great grandparents suffered had literally impacted and infected their DNA, what was inside of them. And so now folk are starting to take that seriously. So everything that we do, everything that we think, say, and do in our relationships, at our jobs, it's fueled by this lingering trauma. And if you don't confront the trauma to seek healing, then you are just going to be part of continual ni- the continual niggerization of Black people. When the term niggerization basically means taking a full human being and making that person believe that they are less than, so that they treat themselves and other people that look like them as if they are less than. And so that's one of the reasons why it's perpetuated, and that's one of the reasons why um, seeking healing for our trauma is so very critical. We were taught not to trust each other. We were taught, like Sister Owen said, that Black is ugly. It wasn't just white folk who were told all these lies about Black. It was us too, and we internalized it and we believed it, and we still do. Even
We're taught that.
we're taught that. And we're not just taught it in school. We're taught it when we go to church. We're taught it when we watch movies, TV. It's everywhere. And there's this, man, I don't have the study in front of me, but there's a study that says Black children receive over 200 negative messages every single day. The problem with that is, for every one negative message a human being hears, they need to hear 5 positive messages just to even it out, just so they don't go crazy.
Okay.
So if a Black child is hearing 200 negative messages a day, they've got to hear at least 1,000 positive. But we're not doing that. That's why we've got to confront this trauma and seek healing. Part of that.
Well, you're so right on. You spoke of some people, and I'm so very blessed and thankful that I was able to study with Naeem Akbar and Molefi Asante.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm telling you, okay, so when you look at something, you begin to see where it's cast. I don't care whether it's cast in church, and their behaviors, little minuscule behaviors of how we treat people every day, whether you can tell a person whether they appreciate where they came from. And I hope we can get into some of those behaviors as to how we negotiate business. All of that has something to do with perpetuating negative beliefs that our children are seeing. So one of the things that I want to go back to that you mentioned, the two of you mentioned, was how people perceive themselves. So Malefi Asante and Naeem Akbar talked about how the brain, the DNA changes when you have to confront yourself with trauma of being in an opposition and having to prove yourself every day unconsciously but not speak of it. And you have to mediate your moves, be conscious of those moves so that you do not offend. Your personality begins to take a different shape. Your biological body begins to change. The cell actually changes itself. And did you know that the brain development begins to change because it has to address more basic crucial needs like food, shelter, clothing, or whatever. So then the higher order thinking of your brain doesn't get chance to really expand itself because it's in a threatening environment. So when you just understand all of that, you begin to know that we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. So I was listening to them on news talking about they don't know what to do now, where to start with a task force. If you begin to set up a task force historically says that we're going to keep things to be the same. We're trying to get people to be approved of staying the same so that we can give installation of hope to the people. But at the same time, it's going to remain the same. And so when you look at history, I want to go back to the cells. People already, the persons who have experienced it, already are beginning to know that they might have to question something. You see? So the way we think about things comes from that, from the history that you're speaking about. And then it's already inside of us, and it then influences our expectations and our perceptions about situations, ourselves, and other things in the environment. You see? Hmm. Right on. Okay, then. So I want to hear a little bit more about how you then say the research talks about healing. What does it say that we need to do in education? What does it say that we're struggling with? See, until we can overcome the struggle ourselves in our minds and in our situations, then are we not stuck?
Dr. Lewis, I think that we can overcome this racism if white people will acknowledge the fact, okay, well, this is what happened to African Americans. They didn't ask to come over here. They were taken. Bob Marley says it best. Buffalo Soldier, listen to his music. He said it best. Our people didn't ask to come over here. And I truly believe that if they knew that this was going to happen, there's no way they would have let Christopher Columbus or whoever befriend them. No, they need to go ahead and accept the fact, acknowledge that, okay, this happened to African Americans. We need to end it from this day forward. That's how we can do it. That is the only resolution that I see. And to speak of the trauma, it's been trauma there for 401 years. So they need to talk about it, acknowledge what happened, and they can break that change. That they can break that cycle if they just treat everybody kind. Hate is taught. Hate is taught. And so I strongly believe that if they educate themselves, because I don't think that we're the ones, they're the ones who need to educate themselves. Because you dislike someone for the color of their skin, you want to kill and murder people because of the color of their skin. No, they need to do some soul searching within themselves, and that's my view on it.
So I guess maybe the question is how to unteach or reteach.
Yes,
Yeah. And
yes, reteach them because they were taught hate. They were brought up in a hateful home to just dislike someone because of the color of their skin. If I cut you, we still gonna bleed the same. So yes, they need to be taught. And we as African Americans, we need to know our history. We really need to know where we come from. I would like to know where I come from. Thank goodness for ancestry.com because I want to know where I come from. From my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was told that Africans knew over 500 languages. I only know one. So no, they need to work on that. They stripped us of our heritage. We know nothing about it. We want to know what they told us.
yeah, yeah.
So,
And I would just add that's what Dr. Maulana Karinga was talking about when he created Kwanzaa and the Nguzo Sabah, the 7 principles. His whole thing about us being healed is reconnecting with the value system that allowed us to be the mothers and fathers of civilization, religion, art, science, and all that. And so the Nguzo Sabah, using the English terms, unity, self-determination, cooperative economics, collective worker responsibility, purpose, creativity, and faith. He's saying if we plug into those and make those a part of our modern day value system, we would then find healing. Reverend Albert B. Cleage, and he argues that we have been niggerized. In other words, we have been socialized to believe that we are less than, not to trust each other. We've been socialized to believe all the negative. And so from his perspective, what we need is another socialization into a counterculture way of seeing ourselves and the world, socialized from a Pan-African perspective, where a few of the main things that allow us to access healing is rituals. Rituals for African people, for Black folk, are critical. And we have way more rituals than we realize. There's that scene in Cooley High where the brothers are together and they pour a little liquor out for those who have gone on, who aren't there. Hell, that's the pouring of libation. That's been a part of us as an African people forever, recognizing that our community is larger than just the people who are living with us. Our ancestors are with us and they want the best for us, which is another huge part of our healing. We've got to reconnect with the whole ancestral realm. And that's getting on a whole different spiritual level. But we've also got to actively re-educate, which is what Sister Owens is talking about, and Dr. Lewis is what you've been talking about. We've got to re-educate ourselves, reorient ourselves from a Pan-African or from an Afrocentric perspective, because the Eurocentric perspective teaches that, you know, we've been passive observers to history, like we have no agency, like we haven't created anything ourselves. But when you do just a little bit of reading and a little bit of research, you recognize that there would be no world, there would be no planet, there would be no civilization without the contributions of African people. I mean, not only were we the firstborn, but we were the first ones to have a thought that there was a power greater than ourselves. We were the first ones to, you know, we were mapping the stars and the positions and the movements of the stars long before there was anything called NASA. Those are the things that we've got to teach our children, that, you know, greatness in math and science, that comes from us.
Right. Yes.
How dare anyone tell us that we can't do math, that we can't do science, that we can't, you know, write incredible poetry and literature, et cetera, et cetera. You know, stop preaching, because I could go on and on about
But even heart treatment and the washing machine,
all of it,
bed,
right.
all of those things that we're all introducing. So the proudness and that we
The
came
cell phone, computer technology.
all of that came from the discovery of African Americans. And so people really don't begin to value. So one of the things is, I want to let Ms. Owens know, did you know that our theme is renew beliefs, rebuild faith, and reconnect families and communities, which is talking about what you're talking about. It is that you have to have those threads of that to appreciate who you are, to even see. Last night I gave an example that people may have preferences. You may have come from Georgia, or you may have come from whatever, and they had a particular food. I'm just giving an example. So because of your history, you have that preference. The difference is that you do not deny someone else to have their preference. You do not punish another person because they have a preference, if it is not harming or denying another person. So moving in our beliefs and growing in terms of cultural awareness is being able to appreciate what our preferences are and allowing another person to be who they are. So I gave an example of tiramisu cake and chocolate cake. I like both of them. And the doctor that we work with would not want me to use this example at all. But I love desserts. So I'll even forego food sometime when I'm looking at calories to say, well, instead of looking at the nutrients to the body, well, okay, then I want this dessert. So so you may like chocolate cake, but you may like tiramisu. But the thing about it is that you're not going to penalize or harm someone or deny someone the privilege of doing something because they like tiramisu. So the difference is not when someone says, I don't see color. You do see color.
Of course you do.
As soon as somebody tells me that I don't see color, I'm colorblind, I already know that I can't trust you.
Yeah.
I already know. Because if I have a red flower here, this pink flower, and you tell me you don't see that this flower is red, then I have to wonder about your judgments, your decision, and how you discern things in your life and how it might affect me. But if you tell me that I see and I know that you are this color, but I like you because blah 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 blah, or da 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 da, I like this, then I can hear you. You see, and I think that that's the type of talk that we really need in our community and among ourselves to move on with some of the stereotypes and biases that we claim, okay, and that we own. Because I know that Malefi Asante did a thing, and they had could you imagine Naeem Agbar, Malefi Asante, and God, what was the together in the room and all talking about how we have claimed illness and how we have shaped ourselves for diabetes around racism, and he called it epidemic. It's an epidemic. It's a word for that, and it says how you take culture and how the trauma that you experience affects your DNA and your cells that you spoke about, and
and to that point, you know, we have repressed so much.
right.
We repress, right? And that's really the opposite of what spiritualists, mental health professionals, and just common sense says you should do. if you want to seek healing. But we avoid, we ignore, we repress to keep on moving. But we did that as a survival mechanism, because if you're working, if you're working for someone, back in the day, and they're saying negative things about you, your people, number one, you want to keep your job. Number two, you don't want to go off and kill somebody and be in jail or dead yourself. So we repressed, and we kept it moving. And we did that as a survival mechanism, but it was literally killing us because that negative energy has to take root somewhere.
Mhm.
And so it takes root in hypertension. It takes root in different levels of cancer. It takes root in heart attacks. It takes root in all of those uh, body malfunctions. But we don't talk about the spiritual damage that repression does. And so we've got to confront our own neuroses and our own madness that's been built up over decades of repressing. And the crazy thing is, we repress when we deal with other folk, but we let out all anger and violence, etc., on each other, on the people, on the people that we love.
Right.
And we either release that negative energy like that, or we release it in negative addictions.
Like I was getting ready to say, like drugs, alcohol, all other forms of trying to sustain.
Yeah, right. As an escape, as a release. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the thing about it is that we are in a position to not only reclaim our heritage, not the positive things from our heritage, but also to make a turn into how we see everything every day, every moment, in order to regain our direction. But somehow we have not, I guess it's our responsibility to those persons who are in a place where they can see it, to try to help individuals who cannot see it, and how it's like a self-harm. That's what I'm trying to say. So you see people who repeat things, and it's a self-harm, so that they cannot move forward. So they end up being stuck in a negative situation that's killing them, be it smoking, be it overeating, be it whatever habits there are to sustain and cope with the trauma and the stress that they have. And I think that that's the resources that we need to bring to the community,
Yeah.
to help them look at how we are actually, and I say, taking the messages from the slave owners. It's like you have adapted the negative messages from the slave owner to emulate behaviors, many of them, only the sick behaviors, from, they call that adopting that was told to you. So you adopt to become a part of the slave owner to be approved. So if you cannot change things, many people then, and you can tell
Stockholm syndrome sounds like.
that's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying. It's sort of like a Stockholm syndrome, but they say it is where you adopt the behavior of the person who's in superior in order for you to maintain some sense of living. Okay, instead of, it's another way to look at it, that once you become yourself and own who you are and learn who you are, then you are able to take the same individual and live in a balanced way, in an equal way, where you accept each other as you are. So one would be a top-down situation, and one would be a sense of equality, a sense of respect. That's the word I want to use, respect. Living in respect with people who are different than you. There's only one way or one or two different ways to do that, but it all comes out of a sense of knowledge and respect, is what my studies show at this time. But I'm listening to you, two of you, from both, all different perspectives.
And that's what I think Malcolm X was talking about when a reporter asked him, what are you trying to wake your people up to? Are you trying to wake them up to their oppression, to their mistreatment? He said, no, I'm trying to wake them up to their worth, their value,
That's right.
who they are. Because once once you awaken that in somebody, it can't be put back to sleep.
That's
And
right.
once you change on that level, uh, you know, Albert B. Cleage and others said to change the world, you have to change individuals, because once you change on the inside, you will demand change around you. You will demand that the people who are mistreating you change. You will demand that the institutions that are selling you and your people short, you will demand that they either change to adapt and respect you, or that they be abolished and you build your own. Um, and I think it goes back to this notion of loving yourself enough to care for yourself. You know, one of the persons that talks most negatively about us is ourselves. You know, we have all this negative talk going on in our head all the time, from various places, from the niggleization to our own negative family experiences, whatever. And that's why one of my favorite people in history is a sister by the name of Audre Lorde, who talked about radical self care. And I want to share a couple of quotes. Well, one quote, if you don't mind. She said, "Caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation. And that is an act of political warfare." So basically, what she's saying is, in the world, in a society that does not care about Black lives, when you take the time to care about your Black life, that is literally political warfare. That is standing up. So, but some people have reduced her words to just me time, but it's not just me time. It's taking care of yourself so that you can then be healthier to work your passion and to build community and to help others. And so I think a lot of what you're saying speaks to me through Audre Lorde and her whole calling for us to take radical self care more seriously, self care of our minds, our bodies, and our spirits, so that, because once we are awakened to who we really are and to our full potential, then we will demand that others treat us better. We will demand that society treats us better. And that's why I really appreciate the words of Miss Owens when she was talking about this present moment and how there seems to be an awakening, because it seems like Black folk are awakened, and it's forcing others to awaken as well.
Right. We have a sign that we're doing an assessment, and it says, be the community that you want. In
Yeah.
other words, if you don't live the thing that you're expecting, and to know that you're going to have to take a stand. And one of the things is that we, as African Americans, have not, some people may not like that term. There's a whole debate about terms. They got us all into the names, but we've assumed the names. So the thing is that if we then begin to stand up when we see something, when we say something, to find ways to do that, you have to take a stand. And I know that most people who have taken a stand tend to be eradicated. I remember, and I want to share this experience because I know I'm much older and you all don't remember. I'm trying to think of the group that was eradicated. They were killed on Dowling Street.
Oh, they were associated with the Black Panthers, but
The
their
Black
name,
Panthers. Yes,
yeah,
they were.
Carl Hampton. Yeah.
Yes, I remember them saying some of the same things. Like, we're really fighting for you to begin to see who you are, for you to begin. And I remember being young, standing there on Dowling Street, listening to some of the things that they would say. And they would say that until you take a stand and learn about your culture, you're going to be abused forever and ever. And we were like trying to understand what it was talking about. But I was also there the day that they burned them down and kill
Okay.
them, and not allow them to come out. And it was so hurtful to see that as a young kid. I remember that was my first time crying and at people dying, and nobody would come and help them. And the children were trying to stop them, but the police and all the people came around and they burned the people down in the building, and they had not done anything. Okay, there was nothing that anybody remembers that they had harmed, but they were a force that were teaching people. Now, there may be some other things, Dr. Walker, I'm sure you could share some things that they probably did in history that I'm not aware of. But I do remember them teaching young kids to appreciate themselves and themselves as an African American.
Teaching young kids to appreciate themselves. And
Yes,
if we're talking about the whole Black Panther Party for self-defense, the free breakfast programs, but they were on the cutting edge of healthcare. A lot of
yeah,
the healthcare systems that we have today were born out of the free healthcare services that the Black Panthers were providing. And so part of that Dowling story that's not told often enough is that the police used a black church
yes.
to position their snipers, and that's an indictment.
Oh my God.
That's an indictment on us.
Hmm.
Uh, Lord have mercy. Um, but something you said made me think of the difference between, and I always tell this to my African American Studies class at U of H, the difference between Nelson Mandela and Steve Biko. Nelson Mandela, I mean, we all know he's fighting against apartheid in South Africa, and his whole focus was look at how the apartheid South Africans are mistreating us. And for that stance, he was thrown in jail. I think he stayed 26, 27 years on Robben Island. Steve Biko had a different focus. His focus was to hell with what they're doing. We've got to focus on how we see ourselves, how
Right.
we feel about ourselves, how we love ourselves. They imprisoned Nelson Mandela. They killed Stephen Biko September 1977.
Hmm.
And so to me, that's a strong indication of which is really the most powerful approach. Are you going to focus all your energy on what other folk are doing, or are you going to focus on waking yourself and your people up? That's the thing that folk fear the most. And I
That's
think that's what Miss Owens was talking about this moment, because it seems like people are awakening, and that's where the real change happens.
I wanted us to listen to right now some things that Miss Owens may want to share. We want to find out like how did she become so involved in what some of her experiences are in terms of working with, living with other cultures, and how that has influenced her way of seeing the world. Mhm.
Well, every time a black man, a black woman is killed, I'm involved because it hurts me. But this recent incident with George Floyd, and to see the officer on his neck and with his hands in his pocket,
You,
for George Floyd to call upon his mother, that broke me down,
hmm,
and it filled my heart with so much rage and
hmm,
so much anger. To
right.
I am currently involved in an interracial relationship. My partner, he's from England.
Mhm.
He's European, and I'm African American, and we've had some challenging times to where I've met his ex-wife, and they want to make me feel uncomfortable and ask inappropriate questions. And at this point in time, to where I'm not taking any sarcasm. I will not be disrespected. My life does matter, and I will stand up and I will speak up for what's right. But I will say, dating, being involved in an interracial relationship here in America, it sucks. It's awful because we've been cursed out. I've been told to come back to the other side, um, whatever that means. But when we go to England, I can hold his hand. I can hold this European, this white man's hand that's completely different from mine, and we're not looked any different. I've never been mistreated when I went to other countries, but here in America, we have been mistreated, all because he's with me and I'm black. So I will continue to stand up and I will continue to use my voice every single time. And this is a new generation. We are not our ancestors. We are not going to take it laying down. You're not going to do any of that. We're going to speak and we will fight. And I had to tell my neighbor yesterday, just yesterday, an elderly lady. I'm pretty sure maybe she's was in her 90s. She said, "Oh, I can understand why you people are upset," and that got me right there. You people are, and I let her say everything that that she wanted. She said, "Well, I can understand why you people are upset, but I don't understand understand why you people do the loop. And I had to explain to her, well, what you mean when you say you people? Because there are three different groups out there. There are the ones like me that are angry and frustrated, and we're tired of our black men and women getting killed and brutalized by these crooked KKK cops, and even some of the black people are cops. I mean, I know you've seen the videos, and it's so insulting and so disturbing to see another black man, you out there helping beat up somebody else. No, unacceptable. Then you have the people that wants to, stand up for right, that wants equality for all, not just one race for all. Then you have the third party, which is the thugs that wants to loot and tear up things and then blame it on Black lives. So I had to ask her, okay, so which group are you talking about? Because I represent that frustrated group, that angry group. My people didn't ask to come here, and that's what I made that very plain and clear to her. So I ended that conversation very shortly with her. So it's not our people, Let's just.
And as you're speaking, I can hear your pain, your frustration.
I'm angry.
You're wondering about, your anger, your pain, your frustration, like what to do, what now, where am I to go with all of this?
Keep marching, keep protesting. That's what we're going to do. We're going to keep marching. We're going to keep protesting because our voices will be heard. I don't want another George Floyd. I do not want that to happen. I will also want them to answer to what happened to Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, all those other people that was killed, Sean Bell, all killed by police. So they need to answer for that, for all of that. Ahmaud Arbery, enough is enough. Right. And so I'm going to be out there protesting peacefully with my people. And another thing, we need to get this hateful person that some of the world consider as a president, because he's unfit for a president. He's a mosquito of a man to talk about this violence and one law, whatever that is. He can't even come up with his own thoughts. So we need to get rid of him and his Klans members. It will be appropriate if we can get rid of these KKK members, Antifa, which are KKK members. Racism, send them to Iraq, send them to Iran, let them go ahead and kill themselves. If we want to make America great, let's just start all over and just get rid of the hateful people and keep the ones that want to do right and do good here. That's where I stand with that.
Someone, I'm going to look it up for the next time. Someone said that whenever there's a crisis or there's anger, there's an energy for change. And if you can take that energy and you can transform the energy with new thinking. So what you were talking about is we have to then take new thinking. How are we going to do that? One of the things is you have to have a policy. You have to begin to infuse everything that we do. Like when you put a billboard sign up, what's the criteria for that? What is the policy for being equitable, honest, and trustworthy, and those things? Using the threads of real healthy environment, community, relationship. The lady that you mentioned, when she said, you people, it meant that what to change, how to help her way of thinking. And when she speaks, how can she appreciate another person when she speaks? Now, I know that our time is almost up. I know we can. I hope we can come back and maybe add somebody else and talk about this next week if you would allow us.
I would like to have my partner, Dr. Lewis. He's English, and I would like for, and I was even discussing with him last night, if him and I could have both talked about it, because like I said, I'm African American, he's European, and I would like to get his view on it too, because we can see that since the George Floyd murder, I had to watch the way that I've been speaking and my frustration, because I have to keep in mind that he's still, European, and I don't want him saying anything derogatory about African Americans, and I don't want to say anything that will offend his race. So I would have loved for him to come here so that I can just speak freely and openly,
If he will agree to be on next week, we'll be on next week. Okay. And I hope that Dr. Walker will be back next week if he can.
Dr. Lewis, would you mind if I quickly just share some resources?
Yes.
For people?
Yes.
Number one, I think I fully agree with what you're talking about, trying to transfer that energy from just rage and all that, and channel it in a way that is building. So anyway, progressive spiritual worship experiences, there are several that I check out or participate in that I think are needed right now. And so if folk are looking for that, you can go to shrines of the Black Madonna.org every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. There's a progressive African centered spiritual message, or you can go to YouTube and type in Shrine Online. You can either type it as one word or two, Shrine Online, and you can find daily devotionals, African centered Bible classes, African history classes. Um, we need to feed our spirit like that. There's progressive talk shows that come straight out of Houston, Texas, All Real Radio, allrealradio1word.com. You can check them out. Really progressive young sisters and brothers doing some great work. And then finally, I talked about radical self-care earlier. There's a Facebook group called Revolutionary Self-Care. So you can look them up to see what events they're having or what things that they're doing. And then right here in Houston, Sister Hitaji Aziz, I know a few years ago, she held a radical self-care wellness campaign. Don't know if she's still doing that, but her whole essence is about
Can you as a resource, we could post it on this show?
Sure.
We could put some of those resources down there, and then I'm gonna try to put up the direction. I know that we're having, and I hope that we can pull people together. We're gonna on Thursday evenings. We're pulling together a transformation for transcendence group, and it's going out to our website. It should be already on there, and we're trying to pull people from the Black Madonna Church and different resources together to look at how to heal the community and how to use the intergenerational approach to healing the community.
And last thing, I know we got to go. Last thing I wanted to say, I just wanted to respectfully disagree with Sister Owens when she mentioned we're not our ancestors. I understand where that's coming from, but on another level, we wish we were our ancestors, because the history of our people, our ancestors were always fighting back. Our incredible courage, integrity, honor, and those are the things that we're not taught about our ancestors. And so I think that's one of the big things that we need to take moving forward, is to learn more about who those ancestors were, because I think we would appreciate them more and recognize just how courageous they were. Oftentimes way more courageous than we are today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Walker. I am very open-minded. So if you want to email me some lectures to educate me, I am open-minded to it. So, hey, I'm open-minded to it.
Yes, and I'm hoping that healing, we're going to try to see if we can talk them in to having a forum over there at this place for the community, either at the resource center or at the church, either one elbow, and from different points of view. But I do want to talk to you personally, and I would hope that your partner would come on next week, and I'll invite both Dr. Walker back and some others that we're going to be talking with. What to do now is the question. What to do for our youth? How do we bridge together generations for wellness and healing? Okay, so I'm going to thank you for being here today, and I'm going to welcome you back at the same time, and hope that your partner will be with us, and then and I'll be talking with Dr. Walker about another person that can come on to be a question.
I'm gonna have to go earn a PhD, because you keep calling me Dr. Walker. I got a master's. I don't have that PhD yet.
Well,
you sound like a doctor.
well, what I said was that you were the doctor of culture.
Okay, I'll take that.
Okay, that's what I said at the beginning, that you were the doctor of culture.
I accept that.
And I think everybody in the community knows that you're the doctor of culture.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay then. So I'll look forward to seeing you all next week, and I'll be talking with you interim. Okay, have a good week. Okay, and thank you.
Take care.
Okay, hello, Dr. Walker, Dr. Aswad Walker. I know that you're the doctor of culturism, and Florraine Owens. I want to thank you for participating with us and sharing your honest opinions and research and thoughts this morning to bring understanding and healing to our topic of the impact of culture and racism on mental health. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Please tune into our website. Look at our website, wrc-houston.com. Sign up for the transformation gathering that we're going to have to explore this topic in realism in the community and to bring treatment interventions to persons who need it. It's not the circumstances that we meet. It is the manner in which we respond that determines health, happiness, and success. And I'll see you next week.